Good afternoon. Now, I wanted to focus on that first song they sang. That one about Yangeni Ngonyama, they were talking about me. And so, but truly it is a wonderful, wonderful honor to be amongst all of you, especially the young ones. Really, really, really good that you are here. My name is Tlandupai, and I've been given the wonderful opportunity to be part of. Oh, thank you. Because later on we're going to have an engagement. I won't call it a Q&A session, because I think part of what we want to do is to actually hear what people actually think. So yes, you may ask questions, but if there's something you want to share relative to what you've heard today, it'd be wonderful if you do that. Because we don't have a lot of time to do that, because I think we can save some of the time for later on, so that you can all participate and engage. I'm already going to start to speak. I wish they could come back again and sing that Ngonyama song, but I don't think they're going to come back for us to speak. But first, let me actually allow us to call upon the stage Professor Sibongile Mutwa to just welcome all of you as she is the Vice Chancellor. I think for tonight we will call it the Mandela University. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you so much, Kanti, our program director, for this afternoon. Thank you very much for that. I want to greet this afternoon Professor Wiseman Lumgile Nkuhlu, our keynote speaker, and his wife, Mrs. Nondima Nkuhlu. Welcome, Sisi and Prof. Our respondents, Ms. Tabinkosi and Fundiswa Square. I want to recognize our Deputy Chair of Council, Ms. Michelle Mbaco, and all the members of Council that are here with us or are joining online. I want to greet the members of the Mhlaba family who are with us here. I'm so happy to see you again, Sis Nomawetu, and the family, and for your respect always of us and our work. Thank you. Thank you very much. The members, the Khoisan leadership present, they always support us. The Deputy Vice Chancellors, Professor Pamela Maseko, the Executive Dean of our hosting Faculty of Humanities, as well as the other deans here present. Dr. Ongama Mtimka, the Director of Raymond Mhlaba Center for Governance and Leadership, staff, students, and alumni, all our community and stakeholder groups, high school learners from several schools across the metro. I want to say, as I start, that you would have seen that there is a group of students from the university who had come to deliver a memorandum this afternoon. Yesterday, we had an unfortunate situation here in the city, just outside the university, where two of our students were attacked and one was killed in their residence just outside the university. Hence, we have had this activity. This is the unfortunate situation about the state of affairs in our country. And then we do apologize to our guests that as they were coming into campus because of the commotion of the students protesting, they might have not been able to gain access to the campus, and I want to apologize for that. It is my privilege to welcome you all to this 2025 Raymond Mhlaba Institutional Public Lecture. It gives me enormous pleasure to welcome again our keynote speaker, Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu. The Raymond Mhlaba Lecture has become an eagerly awaited and significant event in our institutional calendar, stimulating discussions on important societal issues. This evening's lecture, Embracing Purposeful Leadership of Comrade Raymond Mhlaba's Generation, a call for today's leaders, is no exception. We are hugely honored, Prof, that you agreed to deliver this lecture. As the audience will agree, Professor Nkuhlu's contribution to the leadership and social fabric of this country requires no elaboration. He is a prolific scholar and university leader who has served in all levels of academia, including being the Vice Chancellor of what we now know as Walter Sisulu University, as well as a long-standing Chancellor of the University of Pretoria. He is a genuine all-rounder. In my own career, I have been hugely inspired by the work of Professor Nkuhlu, both in the public and private sectors. He is famously known for having been the first chartered accountant, a black chartered accountant this country has produced, and we must give him a round of applause. Thank you. In the times we find ourselves, where we are called upon to rise to the challenges of courageous leadership, Professor Nkuhlu stands out in the vanguard of what is possible. I would also like to acknowledge our two respondents that I have greeted, Tabi Nkosi and Fundiswa Square. Thanks for making time to be here and to play this important role. The strategic intent behind the restructuring of the Raymond Mhlaba Center was to create an entity at Nelson Mandela University that could advance public leadership and governance in our society. Just as an aside, I'm proud to say I actually was part of that generation that Raymond Mhlaba worked with to make sure that we bring the work of the center to this university long before I was destined to come to Nelson Mandela University. This is intended to be done by building relations and partnering with all three spheres of government, public institutions, private sector, and civil society. The work of the center, including this annual Raymond Mhlaba Institutional Public Lecture, thus has considerable potential to give effect to our university's intention to be a socially embedded university that is in the service of society. Comrade, after whom the center and this lecture are named, is a fitting role model of governance and leadership in our country. At a time when people are crying out for ethical and principled leadership, Comrade's legacy speaks for itself. A stalwart, part of the leadership collective that included our own namesake Nelson Mandela and the first Premier of the Eastern Cape, he epitomizes the concept of servant and selfless leadership, of service above self. And those that have met him in his public role, we know if you close your eyes and you think of Tatu Raymond Mhlaba, you think of humility, you think of selflessness, you think of love and laughter. So that is what is the lasting impression that would be left in your mind if you have met that man that Comrade was. I am very pleased also to note that earlier today, Professor Nkuhlu conducted a masterclass. I hope that the student participants, and I've said this to Prof, did realize how privileged they are to be in the class given by you, Prof. I hear from the Dean that the auditorium was full in the council chamber. Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom and experience with the younger generation in that way. This is particularly relevant to us in the light of our priority as the university of promoting student entrepreneurship and youth employability. These initiatives include the Mandela Africa Entrepreneurship Hub, led by Dr. Tobekani Lose, which provides an incubation program and other services to students, graduate entrepreneurs, unemployed young people, and young township entrepreneurs. Early next year, we will be launching here at Nelson Mandela University the Chancellor's Entrepreneurship Fund to sustain and broaden these interventions. I hope that, Professor Nkuhlu, we can find a way of involving you in this initiative. Program Director, my task is to do the opening and welcome, not the vote of thanks. But it would be remiss of me not to appreciate all those involved in breathing new life to the Raymond Mhlaba Center and the Raymond Mhlaba Institutional Public Lecture Series. I want to recognize Mr. Alan Zinn, Professor Andre Kiet, and all that team, Professor Masego, Dr. Mtimka, and their team as well. Lastly, by no means least, again, I want to acknowledge the Mhlaba family. And I've done this many times before, Sis Nomawetu, for allowing us to continue to honor and to be lifted by Comrade in this way. I trust that the center named in his honor and this institutional public lecture series will continue to add luster to his name and also that we may not disappoint him in terms of how we lead the university. Your support over the years as a family is really appreciated. I thank you, Giti. Mazenethole kuni nonke. Enkosi.
Prof. Mutwa, thank you very much for that, especially for the protocol part, because I have a traumatic experience about that. I went to a funeral not too long ago back home, and thank you. And one of the speakers was greeting everybody, and obviously with protocol, and he started to say, our president, our former president, Thabo Mbeki, the former deputy president of our country, Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka. And people started to look around, where are these people? And he mentioned a whole list of, very important people. And we were all looking around, where are these people? But it occurred to me that actually, because there's always these kinds of things where you do protocol, he thought that was the normal thing to do. That you must mention all of these people, because we were all looking and we could not find them. So I thought, what, actually maybe this is something one ought to avoid. Therefore, let's, at this time, please invite a representative of what people lovely called OMRE to come and to say a few words, as has been, it would be a family member, but I guess I didn't get a name here, but whichever one is always one who actually wins everything. Who got the most money when he left? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'm wearing many hats tonight, VC. But when the elders give you instruction, and Sis Nomawetu in her kindness is very good at doing that. You don't argue, you engage. So chairperson of council and members of councils that are online, and everyone else that's online. Prof. Mutwa, the Vice Chancellor of the University, and members of the executive and members of staff present here today. And let me single out the Dean of Humanities, Prof. Maseko, and the person that's been steering the ship very well, Dr. Mtinka. Thank you for your contribution. And then, of course, we are blessed tonight to have Prof. Nkushlu as our keynote speaker, as well as the members of the panel, and Mrs. Nkushlu. Thank you for also coming to join us here tonight. So, Prof, the VC has, I think, reached out to you in a very clear way, and we certainly hope, I don't know which hat I'm wearing now, that you'll honor that invitation, because we know you're a person that invests in our community. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're welcome. Let me also welcome, in particular, our learners from the schools. It's always good, I'm not sure, is it Comrade, Mr. Zinn, for your efforts, because I think it's so important, we see that we do bring our young people into the room, and I think Ray will be particularly happy where he is, because one of the things that Ray did, especially after he finished his stint in Uganda, was to also engage with young people in schools. And I don't see Bertram here tonight, Bertram Secondary, but that is one of the schools that Ray actually visited. It's also the school that when there was the first meeting in PE, Ray, our first president, Madiba, Mandela, and also our first Minister of Sport, visited actually Bertram when they had an event. So the engagement with young people has always been an important one, and therefore to the young people that's here today, thank you. And I hope that you'll be taking notes. You are blessed tonight to have a speaker, Professor Kushlu, but also everyone else that's members of the panel. So I stand here on behalf of the family, and in particular, I think since Nomawetu has now been moved to as one of the elders, so Sis Nomawetu and Ma Pumla and the rest of the family, I think it's wonderful that for us all to then meet here and have this opportunity together in the name of Ray. And therefore, the Mhlaba family would like to thank the university for today's program, VC, and ensuring that Ray's vision and decision, because he agreed initially, and I'm sure Prof. Verdenel can write a nice article about that process of engagement with Ray himself, that he then agreed that there'll be the center and what Ray. And I think it's also indicative of the person Ray was, our first premier of the province of the Eastern Cape as the VC, and I'm not going to repeat what the VC said. First premier in the Eastern Cape, and of course, when he was then asked to move and be an ambassador, high commissioner in Uganda, Ray accepted that responsibility gracefully. And like he has always done in his life, Ray did well, a very, very disciplined. I see him Twabo Ndube here, and I'm sure he'll be able to, of course, also speak to that. But as a person that had the privilege to also work with Ray at some stage, don't ask me how, otherwise the former Director General of the Eastern Cape might be asking a lot of questions, but also traveling with Ray was always very, very, very empowering. Of course, Ray, if you haven't met him, he's got a fantastic sense of humor. And his laugh is one thing everyone remembers. So the values, of course, of what Ray stood for, VC, is what I can proudly say this university embodies. In terms of the diversity, in terms of all the other 5 values that we stand for, diversity, excellence, Ubuntu, that was Ray. And therefore, for this particular center to be housed in this university, it's so perfect in terms of hopefully the footprint that we can not only have in Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, but in the province that Ray served. But Ray was also a person of this country. And so wherever he worked, he flew the flag of South Africa diligently. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat because the VC had covered some of the things that I was also going to raise. But suffice to say that Ray would also today would have been very happy that our Khoisan community is here. Ray was a leader amongst leaders, and Ray was a person that embraced our diversity, celebrated our diversity. And of course, anyone that knows Ray will know, even before they left the country, him and his comrades, that time, all the people that left the country, Galvindale was their home. So when we speak about Omre, we know Omre was that person that had that ability to unify because he embraced diversity, he celebrated diversity, and he was one leader that was very, very humble, and we love him for that. And of course, Omre had a fantastic sense of humor, and so we also celebrate that. So in closing, as a family, we'd like to thank Prof. Nkuhlo for accepting the invitation. And Prof, you are a lodestar. And we are very excited that young people had, as I've learned, the opportunity to engage with you. And also in particular, if the School of Accounting is here, which currently I think the accounting profession has been weathering a number of storms. And I think in that sense also we are really, really grateful that you took the time at this time to engage. So for young people, you are blessed, you have an opportunity that many would not have had. And indeed, in closing, we look forward as a family to the engagement. I thank you.
Of course, it is the age of social media. And so if you will allow me to take a picture for content of all of you so that I can show people on my social media that I was doing something really, really, really important. So smile, everybody. I'm not going to go through the biography of Prof. Nkuhlo, but what I will tell a story that I think will really define, I think, who he is. All of us remember the ugly days of state capture. And KPMG organization he would lead, because of that, was right in the middle of that. There are some definitions that say that actually it's centered and helped actually to facilitate some of the, some of the harmful practices of the accounting profession. And the accounting profession is important, the auditors in particular, because they are actually part of how we assure, that the things that we think are, they are. So many of you will have pension funds. Some of you are in companies. And for us to trust that those things are what they are when we are getting numbers, so somebody gives you a number and says, you know what, you can buy a checkers share because that's where your money is going to be. It is assured by these people. They give us confidence. And the Auditor General is an accountant. The Auditor General gives us the trust that, actually the numbers that our government gives us are actually what they are. Sometimes they tell us bad news. And so because of that behavior, it really shook the very basis of the trust we have in these institutions. And I remember thinking when I was appointed, usually one says to catch a thief, you need a thief. And Prof. Nkuhlo certainly cannot be called a thief. But clearly he's not. That actually he carries in him really the kind of stature, the values that actually led him to be able to actually bring back KPMG. I was sure it was going down. I was really, really sure this organization is not coming back. But because of his stature, because of his values, his ethics, and his history, he was able to bring it back. It is a functional organization that is actually getting clients and competing with my former employers. And that is why he is here today, to be able actually to speak to us at a time like this. And so Prof. Nkuhlo, please welcome, and a round of applause, everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a great pleasure for me and my wife to be at Gqeberha, Nelson Mandela University. We're grateful for the opportunity to interact with you. I want to greet and acknowledge everyone present here. I understand the chairman of council I had being mentioned. I greet her and as the head of this institution. The chancellor of the university, who was not here. The vice chancellor of the university, Sibongile Mutwa, who of course I had the privilege of working with many years. In a way, we belong to the same generation because we see ourselves as the children of Dadu Raymond Mhlaba's generation. So we feel we've got a special responsibility to take over where they left off. So this is really special. Thank you for leading this institution. I think also, recognize also the Professor Pamela Maseko as the dean, the person that who has been looking after me since we arrived here. And of course, the head of the school, Ongama. It's been great. Thank you very much for receiving us. To all the executives of the university, the professors, the lecturers, students, especially to the Mhlaba family. It's, as I say, for me, that generation and speaking on their behalf, on the legacy of one of them, is something that I take with great gratitude and humility. If you would understand that Comrade Raymond Mhlaba is the same generation as my father. May have been a few years younger, but really they are that generation. We see ourselves as their sons and daughters, my generation. So when they said, it's enough, our people have been humiliated by apartheid colonies for so many years, they are going to take arms. And of course, we knew that they were too old, they were our fathers. They couldn't take arms, we had to obey their instructions, take the arms ourselves. So it's my generation that went into Mkondo Wesizwe. I was too young, but for my sins, for my agitation, I ended up in Robben Island thinking that the ANC was not radical enough. So I joined the Pan-Africanist Congress. And because I felt that we were impatient. We're not going to wait we didn't have the patience that they had. So, but of course it was great. When they arrived at Robben Island, I was there, the short time that I was there, to see our forefathers, our leaders arriving and having the privilege of having them directing us during that time was very special. That kept us alive and gave us the inspiration to continue fighting and never to give up. I also welcome the people who are associated with the university, who saw it necessary to join us this afternoon, friends, relatives. It's really great. So, Vice Chancellor, before I get to my prepared lecture, because that generation was very organized and disciplined, I couldn't come here and just talk off the cuff. I had to prepare a proper account. The way that I've prepared the account, I'm prepared the presentation as if I'm giving an account to Omre. Asking myself, why did he say if he would be here? Or if I meet him, how would I explain where we are? So in doing that, I had to be truthful. I had to be sure that I gather relevant evidence. And where I feel that the evidence shows that we took the position that we took in 1994, sometimes on the basis of inadequate information. So where my research leads me to that conclusion, I admit, Omre, possibly what we did in 1994, had we, with hindsight, possibly we should have done things differently, that's why we're here. So I do those kind of things. And then say, over these years, looking back, why our people are still in poverty, unemployment, in disease, hopelessness, when we promised them that the reason we fought the struggle was to get them out of that. Then I try to answer him those things and say, possibly, Omre, we tried this, we tried that, but possibly this and that. We should do this differently. Our understanding of the world in 1994 was incomplete. And possibly even when we tried the policies, we were too accommodating of the ideas of others. We had not experienced the hardship that we experienced as black people in here. So in talking to the students earlier on, I felt it necessary that I ask a difficult question that I believe that we must be able to confront as this generation. The question I asked is that as the descendants of the Khoisan, the San people, and the African nations, indigenous African nations that were here before the white people came, do we feel that we have an additional responsibility to get things right in this country? A responsibility that are bigger than those of other South Africans, simply because it is our forebears who died, were humiliated, governments destroyed, mercilessly, and they became landless. And they were denied education and so on. They fought with limited means. In the end, the world listened. They got their freedom back, the whole continent and Africa in 1994. Do we think, as descendants of the indigenous Africans, the Khoisan, the San, and the African nations, AmaXhosa, abeSotho, AmaPedi, and all other indigenous groups? Do we think? In my view, we do, because it is our people who suffered. And again, the people in the world who continue to be the most downtrodden in terms of poverty and so on is our people. So when we go get degrees and so on, for me, we must be restless until we correct this thing. That's why at my mature age, I'm not young. I haven't stopped researching and thinking about these things and asking myself, what more can I do? Am I doing enough? So, Vice Chancellor, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to also be sharing with you the difficult conversation that I'm having with myself, and also I'm going to talk about the conversations that I would have not at Raymond Mhlaba. What happened? We promised our people that when we're free, we'll get rid of poverty, of backwardness, and our dignity as Africans will be restored. We'll be at the same level of civilization, scientific advancement as other races. What has happened? So with that in mind, then I'm going to move on to my presentation. I hope it's not going to reveal my age and find myself asking for help. I'm going to try not to ask for help and do this thing. Let me see whether I'm going to get there. Yeah, I think I've acknowledged everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. Vice Chancellor, it is with great gratitude and humility that I stand before you today to deliver this lecture in honor and remembrance of Utata Raymond, Comrade Raymond Mhlaba, Omre, a hero of the liberation struggle against land dispossession, racism, colonialism, and apartheid. A man who risked his life for the sake of freedom and the dignity of his people. A man of exceptional bravery who voluntarily accepted appointment as Commander-in-Chief of Umkhonto weSizwe, the military wing of the African National Congress in 1962. At a time when the brutality and viciousness of the apartheid regime was at its peak. He knew that the risks of being killed or jailed were very high, but his commitment to the just cause of freedom was so powerful that nothing could deter him. I salute the Nelson Mandela University for establishing the center. There is no better way of showing our gratitude for the sacrifices that Comrade Raymond Mhlaba and his generation made to fight and defeat apartheid, and by so doing, lay a foundation for the restoration of the dignity of the African people after centuries of denigration and humiliation by the European empires and their descendants who settled in this country and other African countries. The center is a reminder to our generation and generations to come of the duty to complete what Omre and his generation started. This has to be accomplished by defeating the scourge of poverty and underdevelopment, under which the majority of indigenous Africans, that is, descendants of the San, the Khoisan, and other African nations in this country, continue to live. On receiving the invitation to deliver the lecture, I found myself ceaselessly thinking about what Comrade Mhlaba would say if he would see us today. Would he be proud of the progress we have made, or would he feel betrayed? Well, here I just refer you to what I've said on this subject in my book. This is what I say in Purposeful Leadership for Africa in the 21st Century about the aspirations of Omre's generation. In the early years of freedom, African leaders had great aspirations for their countries and the continent. They were conscious of what the black people had been through and the urgency of self-redemption. They knew that as a race, they had been looked down upon and despised. They had been treated as inferior beings and denied recognition as capable of achieving what others have achieved in science and industrialization. Now that they were free, they had a duty to disprove these myths. This was at the core of what was driving that generation. Therefore, against that background, Comrade Mhlaba would be appalled by the current situation. He would ask, what happened? He would say, when he departed in 2005, the country was on course to disprove the myths about the incapacity of Africans to govern themselves with integrity and competence. He would say his generation had handed over the leadership of the African National Congress and South Africa to a young man called Thabo Mbeki. who through his speech, I'm an African in 1996, had given them, Raymond Mhlaba's generation, had given them the confidence that the revolution was in good hands. Just to take you back, why I believe that Raymond Mhlaba, Tatu Sisulu, Nelson Mandela had reason to be confident that they had handed over the baton to people who were groomed under their leadership. They understood what the revolution was about. These are the words that give them that confidence, is when Thabo Mbeki said the following words at the occasion of the signing of the Constitution of the new South Africa in 1996. I'm going to just quote very briefly. He said, I'm an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. I know that none dare challenge me when I say I'm an African. He went on to say, I'm a nation that would not allow the fear of death, torture, imprisonment, exile, or persecution should result in the perpetuation of injustice. Whatever the setbacks of the moment, nothing can stop us now. Whatever the difficulties, Africa shall be at peace. However improbable it may sound to the skeptics, Africa will prosper. It is these words that I believe gave Raymond Mhlaba confidence that they had done the right thing. Yes, South Africa, under the leadership of the ANC, was on course to disprove the myths I've referred to about the Africans being incompetent, inherently corrupt, and incapable of governing themselves. This was the case until 2 years after the death of Omre in 2005. Unfortunately, in 2007, the aspirations of disproving the myths were abandoned. A leader who was unfit to lead was elected as president of the ANC and later South Africa, and with the full concurrence of the ANC and its alliance partners. In other words, with the full approval of the educated elite class in this country, especially black people, because that organization represents the majority of their views at that stage. Well, as shown in many reports, as a result of that, as shown in many reports, this event marked the beginning of a slide of the country into institutionalized corruption and economic stagnation. In the book, Purposeful Leadership, I analyze this phenomenon more comprehensively. If you want to understand those, buy and read the book. In my analysis, I go beyond the oversimplification of attributing it all to the election of a corrupt president. I point out the failure to deal with the economic legacies of colonialism and apartheid during the political negotiations in the early 1990s, and also the rapidly rising expectations and demands by the black elite for a bigger slice of the economy post-1994. In the last chapter of this book, which is chapter 11, I highlight the fact that at independence, the African states now, talking about the continent, so the African states, including South Africa, lacked the most fundamental preconditions for economic and political success. This was also true of South Africa in 1994. This is what I say. At independence in 1994, they lacked the most basic ingredients that were essential for states to be viable. The people assembled within these states had no shared common institutions and memories that they all treasured and would be prepared to sacrifice their lives in order to preserve and protect them. Therefore, they were not coherent nations, but groupings of people who had to initiate the processes of forging themselves into nations from scratch. In addition, they had no embedded traditions of valuing education and scholarship, and also had not been touched by the scientific and industrial revolutions that had transformed the West from the 17th century onwards. As a result, they did not have the critical mass of people with the requisite education and skills to harness the science and technologies that were necessary to diversify and grow their economies. They did not have qualified and experienced professionals to build effective and efficient bureaucracies. This is a deeper understanding of what the situation was in 1994. Therefore, what I would say to Omre is that unfortunately, since 2008, his movement, the African National Congress, and the black elite in this country has failed to produce leaders with intellectual capacity, wisdom, ubuntu, integrity, and diplomacy needed to take the country forward. Because of this failure, the ANC has lost the confidence of the people and its historical role as a leader of the revolution for justice and equality in a non-racial, non-sexist South Africa. This would be very painful to Omre. But as I said, I'm led by research, by evidence. If I'm a scholar, I'm a university student or a university professor, I must not be afraid of being guided by facts and telling it as it is. I would also say to Omre, with hindsight, it is now clear that the ANC had inadequate understanding of the challenges of taking over the administration of the state in 1994. It assumed that by virtue of being members of the African National Congress, those elected to positions of leadership at the various tiers of government would perform their duties with competence and integrity, and would also be loyal to the government as well as respect and protect its assets. Of course, this was a grave mistake or misguided way of rewarding or buying loyalty to the party. They were an outsider with knowledge of financial management, administration, of modern institutions. It was incomprehensible, difficult to understand. It is true. Yes, the shortage of properly qualified professionals in groups, among black people in particular, was real. Moreover, allowing whites to dominate appointments at senior positions in the public sector would have been a complete betrayal of the black people who sacrificed their lives for freedom. But expecting people who had never held positions of leadership and accountability in situations where their loyalty and allegiance was not to an individual or a chief or political party, but to a legal entity with a separate legal persona created in terms of the law, those people who had never had that experience would instantaneously be passionate and protective of such institutions was too much of a stretch. Thinking about it, such arrangements, the responsibility were to carry in government, especially at local government level, thinking about it now, such arrangements are simply unknown in traditional societies, in the sort that we had before colonization. To expect people with minimum or no education to appreciate accountability and responsibility that come with appointments to municipal leadership positions was totally unrealistic. At a minimum, basic educational qualifications and accredited technical competencies should have been set for all levels, including municipal councillors. This would have forced the country to provide technical training on an accelerated basis. Because we fail to do this now, the country is saddled with bad precedent that is going to be difficult to change. You are scholars. I hope you'll be able to digest this thing and so say where this right-wing fellow coming from. So I argue that we should inculcate a culture of valuing and respecting education and formal qualifications. That's what we must do, inculcate that culture. We should learn from the Asian countries who were humiliated and colonized by the European empires like Africa, but have managed to lift themselves primarily through prioritizing high-quality education and technical training. As discussed in the Purposeful Leadership, we need a radical and revolutionary reset of our approach to education and scientific and technological advancement. This should become the new gospel and should permeate all spheres of society, accelerating the scientific and technological transformation of the country must receive the same level of prominence as advocacy for human rights, the fight against corruption, and being an ethical society. I argue that there is definitely a direct relationship between ethical conduct and one's sense of self-esteem. Self-worth is dependent on having a clear purpose for your life, as well as confidence that you have the capacity and capabilities to pursue your life, your life purpose. Capacity and capabilities, on the other hand, come from science and education and are essential pillars for self-love and personal integrity. In addition, they have the effect of reinforcing your ethical conduct. In other words, I'm saying the way that you can really be ethical and respect and want to be recognized as a very successful mayor or a successful leader of a department is when you have the accredited qualifications by a professional body to actually be in that position. That's what integrity would come from you wanting respect by your profession and so on. So if you don't have that, the likelihood that you will not have the discipline to really be guided by the values of your profession and therefore behave with integrity because you want people to respect you as a professional, you'll be inclined to say, yeah, I'm here for a short time, and if people, I want the people to love me and then elect me again, the only way I can do that, I know that I don't have the competency for this job, is just to do whatever they want me to do. And you're setting people for corruption. So for me, this fundamental truth that we understand better now as professionals, let's have the courage to talk about these things and say that let's reset the country. Therefore, it is therefore misleading to talk about ethical conduct without addressing the factors which undermine self-confidence and self-worth. Hence my call for adoption of minimum educational and accredited technical qualifications for appointment to all leadership positions, including politicians. There must be targeted operating models for government departments and municipalities with clearly defined qualifications for all leadership positions. You must have, for each local government, there must be clarity. If you are going to be a mayor, minimum you must have these qualification competencies. And if you are going to be a town manager, this is what you should have. Minimum, because you are running water, you are running infrastructure, there must be an engineer with these qualifications and so on. And if we don't do that, we're betraying our people who made the sacrifices for us to be free. We'll forever be be living in hopeless situations where we're going to get deeper in poverty and hopelessness. You know, let's have courage. If I would have a conversation with Omre, this is the other thing I would say. I would say, Omre, I understand these things better now. And because I don't want to betray you, I feel that we must confront that our understanding was insufficient at that time. Let's have courage now to do things correctly. So I would say to Omre, I'm talking to something else now. I would say another very important idea that we missed or did not get right in 1994 is the fact that modernity has two pillars. Liberal democracy and market economies on the one hand, and science and technology on the other. I think we're definitely giving considerable focus to the first pillar, protecting human rights, promoting multi-party democracy, and fighting corruption, as well as supporting market-based economy. But we're not giving adequate attention to the second pillar. Here what Yuval Harari says. This is one of the top thinkers of the century, the writer of *Sapiens*. I urge you to read that. He's one of the top thinkers, of our history as humanity. What things have enabled us to overcome disease? What things have enabled us to overcome poverty? This is what he says. So I'm saying here what he says about the strategic significance of the second pillar. I said the second pillar is science and technology to human progress. He asserts that it is breakthroughs in science and technology which enabled Europe to leap ahead of other civilizations from the 17th century onwards. To use his terminology, it was the discovery of ignorance that gave the Europeans the mindsets to leap ahead. These are his words. The great discovery that launched the scientific revolution was the discovery that humans do not have answers to their most important questions. Pre-modern traditions of knowledge, such as Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Confucianism, and African oral stories, asserted that everything that is important to know about the world was already known. The great gods or the Almighty, or the wise people of the past, possess all-encompassing wisdom which they revealed to us in the scriptures or oral traditions. It was inconceivable that the Bible or Quran or stories of African elders were missing out on a crucial secret of the universe, a secret that might get discovered by flesh and blood creatures. Then what does this revolution say? It says that the scientific revolution invalidated these mindsets, that when you want answers, you ask your grandfather, or you approach the Bible. It invalidated all those things. What it said, after the Second World War, the agent, I did say that, these things. Sorry, I've missed my place now. Yeah, I was just saying that the scientific revolution invalidated these mindsets. And then from the 17th century, the Europeans began to believe much more strongly than other civilizations that through science, they could acquire new capabilities as well as master nature on a much bigger scale. After the Second World War, this is the important part, after the Second World War, the Asian countries fostered similar mindsets. Similar mindsets through intentional and purposeful interventions in education and technical training. Many studies confirm that it was these actions that enabled them to catch up with the West and to significantly uplift the standards of living for their people. The point there is that I'm not going to go the history, how many, that other civilizations have also gone through this leap forward, these steps when they leap forward in knowledge and break new grounds and leave others behind and so on and so on. But the point I'm making here is that in the history of the modern world, those breaks, scientific inventions of the 18th and the 19th century give Europeans an advantage to bully the rest of the world. What am I talking about here? I'm talking the steam engine in 1769. I'm talking about locomotive trains for the first time in the world in 1804. I'm talking about electric motor in 1821 and electric generator in 1831. The telegram in 1837. Those inventions, whether you like it or not, I'm not saying the whites are better than anybody. They set them apart for a while, and they enable them to bully the rest of the world. If you deny this, you'll remain poor and hopeless as you are, because the other nations that recognize that there are these inventions that they've given the Europeans greater capability than themselves, they said, we're not going to allow this. Let's take steps intentionally and purposefully to catch up with them, and through our education, go to them and understand where the nature of these ideas, and make sure that we incorporate these ideas in our own education and equip our people with the same capabilities and mindset to catch up and so on. This is what the Asians did. This is what the Chinese did. They did this within a short time by transforming their education, enhancing their capabilities. They caught up with Europeans in many areas, surpassed them. It was intentional and purposeful, led by visionary leaders who had the courage to challenge their people and give them opportunities to actually acquire the knowledge, acquire the capabilities, and acquire the mindsets. I'm saying to you, as Africans, as African people, we have the same opportunity to learn from the measures that the Asians took to close this gap, get ourselves out of poverty, get ourselves from being the least developed continent in the world. My generation has failed to do that. But now we know we've got this information. Harari has explained more than anybody else that the leaping forward of the Europeans was caused by these inventions. So the rest of the world must just understand that and have the humility and honesty to say, let's learn those things and capture them and integrate them in our culture and mindsets and work in a disciplined way to close that gap. And then poverty will be something of the past. We'll not be crying to the rest of the world when there's poverty and unemployment. We'll be able to solve ourselves. So this is what I would say to Omre, that there's nothing special about the Europeans. Indians, when they studied that, they actually, to make this thing even very clear, how the Indians and Chinese really, in a focused, intense, and purposeful way, tried to understand this knowledge that was special, that had given the Europeans power to develop aeroplanes, locomotives, and so on, and try to integrate in their own people and do it better than the Europeans, is the fact that almost all the major technology companies, whether you talk Microsoft, you talk Google, look deeply. Either number one is an Indian, or number two is an Indian. It's intentional. Nehru, when he became prime minister, first prime minister of India, what did he do? He established technology institutes and said, I'm going to close this gap. This civilization of these white people was far less sophisticated than ours. It's an accident that now they find ourselves here, we're learning from them. We're better than them. Let's just send our people to just understand and incorporate those ideas in our education. And because we know that we're better, we're going to be better, we're better disciplined than them. They did that. So when they look, it's, of course, the Europeans, Americans don't give Chinese senior positions the same extent as Indians because they are worried of communism. But if really you could take in terms of the quality, the number of PhD graduates in top complex mathematics, computer science, and so all that, it is Chinese and Indians. Not by accident. It's intentional, purposeful leadership, disciplined as well that goes with that. So there's no miracle. We can get out of poverty. We can get out of the stigma of being the most least developed country in the world. But possibly I'm just going to, I would say to Omre, the other thing that I just want to take up with him. I would say, well, Omre, I would not end up by just raising the thing that I've ended. I would also say, in addition, I would say the country needs strong African agency. African men and women who have the ability to think and act independently, make decisions and shape their own futures politically, economically, culturally, and intellectually. This is imperative because Africans have indigenous cultures and historical experiences that are different from those of other races. For this reason, they have something distinct to contribute to the world. But for this to happen, Africans should be proud and confident to view and interpret the world from their own experiences. I'm talking to academics here, or aspiring academics. I'm saying about this issue of African agency. I'm saying, let me repeat this. When I talk about Asia, I'm talking about African men and women. Again, African, I've said, I want to repeat this thing so there must be no misunderstanding. To me, Africans means the indigenous people of this continent, the Khoisan, the San, and all the African groups that were here before the settlers came. So I'm saying, when I talk about strengthen African agents, I'm saying African men and women who have the ability to think and act independently, make decisions and shape their own futures politically, economically, culturally, and intellectually. I say this is imperative because Africans have indigenous cultures, historical experiences that are different and unique to themselves, different from those of other races. For this reason, they have something distinct to contribute to the world. But for this to happen, Africans should be proud and confident to view and interpret the world from their own experiences. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. History shows that in newly independent countries, including South Africa, it is common for the indigenous elite to adopt the cultural practices of the former masters and to seek to validation by this group in the policies they adopt and actions they take. This invariably leads to policies that get approval by outsiders but don't necessarily serve the best interests of our people. As this tendency builds up, the indigenous elite gravitates away from the masses and use its political connections with the head of state to enrich itself at the expense of the public. This, of course, marks the beginning of decay of African agency. However, the starting point in talking about African agency has to recognize strong agency that was demonstrated by African leaders during the liberation struggles and in the early years of freedom. African nationalists took the initiative to organize the masses and to confront the colonialists. These initiatives were inspired by outstanding African thinkers and historians, post-independence leaders like Julius Nyerere, Mnandi Azikiwe, Kwame Nkrumah, Leopold Senghor, Jomo Kenyatta, and many others. Distinguish themselves as thinkers and independent actors, asserting that as Africans, they had their own economic and political ideas that should be respected and factored into decision-making. I go further to say the establishment of the Organization for African Unity in 1963 was the strongest manifestation of African agency. Strong agency has continued to drive progress at the Pan-African level as evidenced by the transformation of the Organization of African Unity into the African Union in 2002, and by the launch of the AU Agenda 2063 in 2015, and the African Continental Free Trade Area in 2018. Good demonstration of strong African agency, but unfortunately, the record of African agency at the country level, as opposed to Pan-African level, is rather disappointing. There are just too many cases of state capture and corruption by the elite in cahoots with egoistic, narcissistic presidents, self-loving and presidents that they think that they were sent by God to lead their people and they are not accountable to anybody. And this has been lamented by a number of African leaders, thought leaders, many African historians and economists, including Ali Mazrui, Frantz Fanon, Amika Cabral, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and many more have written extensively about the indigenous elite that appeared in newly independent African states. I'm going to quote on this because we must sober up as the elite and also understand our role here, complicity in deepening poverty in our countries. This is what Ali Mazrui said. He said, that is in the book, The Africans, A Triple Heritage. He laments the decay of infrastructure in a number of African countries during the 1970s and 80s. He identifies the indigenous elite working in cahoots with corrupt political leaders as the group that is responsible for the decay. He also condemns excessive cultural westernization without simultaneously making the sacrifices in investment to acquire Western production techniques. This is what Frantz Fanon says. He's also disparaging of the role of some African leaders, presidents, as well as the indigenous elite in these countries, which is us. This is what he says. The intellectuals who on the eve of independence rallied to the party now make it clear by their attitude that they gave their support with no other end in view than to secure their slices of the cake of independence. The party is becoming a means of private advancement. This is what he says in The Wretched of the Earth. Cabral and Thiong'o. Thiong'o is the great authority on the question of decolonization of the mind. He too is equally scathing of the selfishness and unpatriotic conduct of us as the group, as the elite. Ngugi uses very clever language in his novels to portray the depth of corruption that is perpetrated in the countries, African countries, by this group, by us, the elite. Much as these authors share experiences from other African countries, their insights have relevance to South Africa. The Justice Zondo Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud revealed complicity of the African professionals as well as businessmen and women in numerous corruption activities. In addition, there are many other publications which detail evidence of black middle-class complicity in corruption and state capture. Another trend that Ngugi, Wationgo, and Thandeka Mkandaweri specifically are very critical of is the tendency of the black intellectuals to value validation by external interests more than remaining faithfully on the side of the masses. In the process, becoming champions of policies that are praised by the dominant neoliberal thinkers and industrial bankers, business, but not impactful on poverty reduction and enhancement of meaningful participation of locals in the economy. Of course, bringing these matters to the fore, I'm just provoking you, does not imply that there are no African intellectuals with strong agency. There are intellectuals who vehemently oppose corruption and pandering to foreign ideas that are not rooted in local, that are not pandering to this idea, that are not rooted in local realities. These voices remain strong, but few in many parts. They remain strong, but few in many parts of the country. As a result, corruption and abuse of political power to enrich small circles of the elite at the expense of the majority remain strong. We must question ourselves in South Africa, is it a question of the ANC or is it just a question of the whole class that we are, the educated elite, that we have become so engrossed with just looking at ourselves selflessly and not caring about being disciplined, serving others and uplifting them in a way that, in other words, not accepting the African agency that comes from the realization that poor, uneducated people made sacrifices for us to get the freedom that we have today. And therefore, we have got a reason to be concerned not just about ourselves, but about the welfare of others, especially those who are less educated than us. In Purposeful Leadership, I highlight the exceptional, strong personal agency demonstrated by a number of Asian leaders in lifting their countries out of poverty and underdevelopment. The most outstanding examples are, of course, Emperor Meiji of Japan in 1867 to 1912, Chiang Lee-Kun Yew of Singapore in 1959, and more recently, of course, Deng Xiaoping of the People's Republic of China. I make the point that they led with patriotism, courage, pride, firmness, and unwavering commitment to lifting their people out of poverty and underdevelopment. Validation by the West was less important to them than achieving their national objectives. Remember what I say, led with patriotism, courage, pride, firmness, unwavering commitment to lifting their people out of poverty and underdevelopment. Policies they adopted were not meant to please any other party than to advance the interests of their people and get them out of poverty and underdevelopment and restore their dignity and respect by the rest of the world. So my final point is that Africa and South Africa's challenges will not be effectively and sustainably addressed until such time that educated Africans with strong agency emerge. That is, Africans who have the ability to think and act independently and make their own decisions to shape their own future. Africans who have a deep appreciation of the ideas that have driven human progress across the ages, but are not ashamed to say Africa's knowledge and experiences are worthy of being integrated as legitimate components of the wisdom that should inform the choices that South Africa and the world make in shaping the 21st century. We must ask ourselves, are we these Africans? Africans who have a deep appreciation of the ideas of all humanity that have driven progress of all humanities across ages, but are not ashamed to say that Africa's knowledge and experiences are worthy components, worthy of being integrated in shaping the ideas that must drive the agenda of the 21st century. Or we're just pandering around to be acceptable to what other ideas that come from other civilizations. What are we doing? So, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I hope I've been controversial enough to get your people thinking, challenging you. I'll leave it at that, but thank you very much for the invitation. And of course, commented by my wife, she has tolerated these ideas and so on. I'm saying these things, you know, ladies and gentlemen, not just to be provocative. I'm restless because I was so naive in my youth. I sincerely believed that with freedom, as Africans, we'll achieve the same level of prosperity as other races of the world. We'll not be pandering on our knees to Trump when he decides to be un-African and so on. We'll have used the massive resources of this continent to build our self-independence and sufficiency as a continent and be able to carry ourselves regardless of what the rest of the world does. But here we are. We're more dependent now than we were when you attained freedom. I'm challenging you, let's not have excuses and try to make things look better than they are. We've failed ourselves, we've failed our people. We've got all the resources, all the opportunities to redeem ourselves and do things differently. Our generation, Omre's generation, did their part. It's up to us who are living now, who are getting education to do our part. Black people can get out of poverty, of underdevelopment, and achieve the same level of prosperity and scientific and technological progress that other nations have achieved. After the Europeans achieved their breakthroughs, Indians and Chinese have achieved the same breakthroughs and have actually surpassed the West. We are the ones who have the duty to catch up and redeem ourselves. I'm challenging the Nelson Mandela University community to take the baton and lead the charge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for those words. You know, I think two things kept coming up as I was listening to the professor. Freedom, which of course was important and something that we attained, and education. And it reminded me of this quote by Iris Murdoch, who says, "Education does not make you happy, nor does freedom. We don't become happy just because we are free, if we are, or because we've been educated, if we have, but because education may be the means by which we realize that we are happy. It opens our eyes, our ears, tells us where the delights are lacking, convinces us that there's only one freedom of any importance whatsoever, and that is the freedom of the mind. And it gives us the assurance and the confidence to walk the path of our mind." And in that sense, what the Prophet is telling us is really to actually build those minds, to have an education, to understand freedom, and then to be able to walk that path knowing that. And I think part of it is why we see what of this failure? Why we see so many people buying 3 cars of the same color? Right? Because they think they are free. And that even if we educated them, if they don't feel the freedom of they are free, but you are not educated, you're not able to walk that path of your mind. So thank you very much for that. We have 2 respondents who are going to come up to share their own thoughts in terms of part of the discussions that we have to constantly be having. And I encourage all of you again to listen, because as soon as they've spoken, we are going to open the floor for you. The first up to speak will be Tabingosi. And Tabingosi is a businesswoman, an agri-economist, and the former chairperson of the board of the Land and Agricultural Development Bank of South Africa, what we used to call the Land Bank. Tabi, please come and give us a few words.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Klanti, and a special greeting to Professor Wiseman, Guhlu, the Mhlaba family, and a thank you to all the leadership of Nelson Mandela University, Professor Maseko, Dr. Mdimka, for the very kind invitation to contribute to this very important discussion. Prof. Guhlu, your lecture is very profound and it is very well timed. At a time where we are watching our screens and it feels like we are fighting for the very soul of this country, your words truly are a clarion call and really give us direction in trying to deal with some of the issues that we are faced with. When I was preparing to respond to your lecture, I thought to myself, my goodness, what does one say after an intellectual juggernaut has spoken? As an avid follower of your scholarly work, your professional work, I anticipated that your lecture would be an intellectual feast, and it was. I tried to ask Professor Maseko for some clues as to what will Prof be talking about, and unfortunately she did not indulge me. So I will go through some of the preparations that I made and really in how I've interpreted your theme, while also reflecting on some of the very important points that you've raised today. And I do want to say for the future, Prof. Nkutlu, not sharing your remarks beforehand is very un-African. But as I prepared for this lecture, I really couldn't help but notice the very beautiful and deep symmetry between the life of Wimre and the work of Professor Nkutlu himself. While Dr. Raymond Mhlaba embodied how I see it as the moral soul of political leadership, Professor Nkutlu here really embodies the ethical conscience of economic and professional leadership, and we've heard it here today. And in the many readings that I have done, you notice that both men have been confronted with some serious challenges. For Wimre, the theme was largely about broken political system, a broken and fractured political order, and for Professor Nkutlu, it was about institutions and economies that were struggling to regain their moral conscience and have really disappointed him in a way that we have heard about today. But what I reflected upon, and in fact this has been confirmed in the profound address that Prof. Nkutlu has delivered today, is that when faced with these challenges, both men, both Wimre and both Prof. Nkutlu himself have chosen the harder path here. They've chosen to rebuild from within and to speak truth to power, which is very, very difficult. And they both understood that leadership is not about just shouting from the sidelines. It really is about the discipline of being able to speak that truth, but also embody that truth and show up even when the cost is highest. And together they remind us that leadership is not just an event, but a test of character over time and something you need to keep doing over and over again. Now, we heard this afternoon about Prof. Nkutlu's many, many achievements, and One of the great firsts that he accomplished was that he was the first black chartered accountant, and this is, of course, something that we all hold with a lot of pride. But I'd like to think, Prof. Nkutlu, that even at the time, in 1976, when you accomplished this great feat, you understood that it was not personal to you. You understood that it was political. It was a message for us in future generations that excellence has no color, and that professional mastery in itself is a form of liberation. And this is really the point that I believe you were making today about education and the purpose of education as a tool for liberation. Later on, when you took over as chairman of KPMG at a time when the institution was marred by scandal and distrust, you stepped into the breach and you began the slow and I'd say quite unglamorous work of rebuilding that institution. At that point, many of us, myself included, of course, were watching the Zondo Commission and absolutely just commentators on the side. I mean, it was COVID time, so we were watching this full time, and I know I'm not alone. And so commentary was the most common response here, but you didn't choose that. You didn't choose the disengagement of academic critique. You chose a very high cost of accountability when you stepped into the ring. And as I thought about this, Professor, there are words that come to me from a passage that Theodore Roosevelt delivered in 1910. And I do know that this is a somewhat problematic historical figure. But I do believe that this man's words really carry through time and through continents, and I think transcend even the personal worldviews of the speaker. And they go as follows. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, but does so actually strive to do the deeds. He knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause. And when I listen to those words, they could easily have been written about Raymond Mhlaba, whose courage was tested not in boardrooms, but in prison cells. And they could also easily have been written about Professor Nkutlu, who entered the arena of institutional redemption when others fled. And those words resonate very deeply and very personally for me as well in my own leadership journey. When I took over as chairman of the Land Bank in 2021, I was both the first woman and the youngest person to assume this position in the entity's over 100-year history. I walked into an institution that was in deep crisis. It had defaulted on over 40 billion rands of its debt. It was accumulating losses running into the billions at that point. Institutional capacity had been gutted, and trust had completely been lost. And much like Prof. Nkutlu, when you were considering the opportunity to join KPMG, I too engaged with trusted advisors and those who care for me. And of course, their advice to me was, don't do it. Wait until it's fixed. What about your reputation? You're still young, etc. But one friend came to me and said, we cannot continue to outsource the revival of our institutions and the rebuilding of our country to other people. Why is it other people's responsibilities to get South Africa working into the country that we need it to be? And so, with those words, I then took the helm to lead the crisis, to lead the Land Bank through crisis. I realized that leadership is not about comfort, but it is about walking into discomfort. And through many, many months, a lot of painful evenings, and a team of dedicated men and women, both on my board and in the National Treasury, we managed to turn the Land Bank around. We negotiated and concluded one of the most complex debt restructuring exercises in the history of this country. We restored the entity back to profitability, and now the entity is funding more emerging farmers than at any point during its history. Many of those farmers here in the Eastern Cape. Thank you. Beyond the numbers, however, I'm most proud that we were able to collectively restore trust and to demonstrate that our institutions had been salvaged. And that was a necessary message given the discouragement that had engulfed our country. That experience taught me more than any degree or title ever could, is that leadership is not about fearlessness, because goodness knows I was extremely afraid. But it is about stepping in even when you are afraid, and it's about standing firm and doing the right thing when it costs you the most. And when I look back on the work of Comrade and the contributions of Professor Nkuhlu, you realize that they really embodied the same principles. They were in different arenas, but they chose integrity over ease and purpose over popularity. Now today, our country faces not a crisis of ideas, but a crisis of purpose. I believe that the intellectual capacity exists. The strategic direction that we all need to follow is unclear, however. We have technocrats without moral fiber, politicians without integrity, and leaders that lack self-discipline. And one need look no further than what we're currently seeing with the South African Police Service goings on, both in Parliament and in the Madlanga Commission, where an institution that is meant to protect and serve has been paralyzed by politicking, compromised intelligence, etc. And I don't believe that what we have in that institution and many others is a crisis of capacity, but it's a crisis of character. And I think that Professor Nkuhlu, having read your books, I think that you would have called it a failure in self-mastery. I now, yes, in self-mastery. And I do believe that Comrade would have called it moral decay. And I too have seen it up close in my own experience, how quickly systems can unravel when we don't pay attention to these things. While we judge, though, and can look at these people on TV with shame and with judgment, we must not pretend that the issue of moral decay lives only in the government. Each of us must ask, in what ways have I normalized mediocrity and moral decay? When have I chosen silence over the truth? And what systems am I protecting and participating in that no longer serve the public good? Because purposeful leadership amongst us all of here really begins when we stop outsourcing our morality. It begins when a student refuses to cheat on a test. It begins when a driver refuses to pay that cool drink on the side of the road. It begins when a board refuses to bend its ethics to expediency. And that renewal that we need here is made in those quiet choices that we make daily and needs to be repeated until it forms a culture. To the students here in this room, I want to say that leadership is not a title that waits for you at some point into the future. It's a habit that you need to start practicing now. Comrade was your age when he began to organize. Professor Nkuhlu was in his 20s when he decided that apartheid would not determine his destiny. And I was 35 when I started to lead the Land Bank through its crisis. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered and because it was necessary. So I really want to encourage you today to lead in your communities, in your classrooms, in whatever arenas that you are in, so that we can start building that capacity for this country that we love. In closing, I'd like this evening really not to be about ceremonial memory, but to really be a proper reflection, not just on the legacy of what Comrade stood for, but also the important reflections of Professor Nkuhlu. Let it be a mirror and a moment of truth. I want us to commit to leading with purpose and really put service before status and discipline before our desire and our integrity before our ambition. Because I believe that for our generation today, and I say our because I think I am of the generation of most here, for our generation here, our failure really lies in the normalization of mediocrity and of moral decay, in the things that we choose to revere and the things that we choose to applaud instead of absolutely throw out. So let us honor today the memory of Comrade and Professor Nkuhlu's wisdom, not by applause, but by alignment and by heeding the calls that they have made to us. We need to lead with courage, with conscience, and walk through that Vulindlela door with integrity, with humility, and with purpose. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Tabi, again inviting us to the arena. And then our last but not least respondent is Fundiswa Skwiya, who is independent researcher, a television show host at Mpuma Kapa TV, former board member of Armaments Corporation of South Africa, and former Stanford University fellow, Chevening Scholar in 2017-18. And so please, can I invite you to come and talk to us?
Is it evening yet? Okay. Thank you, Program Director. Good evening to the keynote speaker, to the management of the university, and to the Raymond Mhlaba family, and to the scholars that are with us this evening. Prof, I think it's really a challenge to speak after you have spoken, and Tabi even made it worse. So I'm in crisis, because all the good nuggets have been eaten, you know. But let me attempt to do what I can and not undermine what has been done here. First of all, I think for me, what the Prof has said about panicking at this point and being agitated with what is happening, it's something that is happening to the rest of us, you know. At this point in my career, I'm at a point whereby I think I'm taking a break because I'm tired of the whole public service, you name it. You know, it's really draining, it's toxic, you know. And at this point that I'm taking this break, I decided to work together with another NGO here in Port Elizabeth, which is called Amakawe Etu. And what I've been doing with that NGO is that I host one of their shows on Mpuma Kapa TV. And what we've been trying to do with the show is basically to reflect and tell the stories of our stalwarts and our forebearers, actually, and try to align them to the current struggles that we have in society. In that way, we're trying to get the current leadership to reflect and to take nuggets from our forebearers to see how they can do better and to see what's been done. And it's really, really, really been, for me, I think it's been a humbling one, because I guess it's making me even worse. As I thought it's a solution, but I guess it's because I feel that so many efforts, so much life lost, and yet we are here today. We are looking at the institutions that are supposed to protect our democracy, institutions that are supposed to protect our lives, but they are actually collapsing. Where have we gone wrong as a country? It's really, really worrying. Now, coming to the legacy of Omre, it's really an illustrious one. But what I see as a recurrent theme on his legacy is the fact that, together with his generation, their leadership was rooted in values, and they had collective struggle, and it was not about personal gain. It was about society. And today, how many selfless leaders do we have in society? How many selfless leaders do we have in government? You know, because in this day and age, we have a serious problem when it comes to, especially in public service. People think that the positions are about gratifying themselves. A position is about self-gratification, it's about being important. For instance, I remember at some point serving in a board, I once warned some of the board members that be careful of taking gratuity from executives, because that's how you're captured. You won't be able to take informed decisions because you'll be captured. If someone is saying that I can help you with this, I can help your child to get into university, we have a bursary here, that's gratuity, you won't be able to lead. So we have that. There is no moral clarity within our public service and our politics today, and especially in our society, because looking at the kind of for instance, in communities, if you look at the kind of what do you call them? What do you call them in society, in words, the word councillors? The challenges that I've seen in the word councillors are part of the problems themselves. If you're talking about the problem of tenders in Port Elizabeth, the word councillors are within. If you're talking about the problem of, you know, the collapsing municipality, the councillors are in, people are just hopeless. And my critique actually to the current leadership is that I feel that our people are not led, especially the people at the grassroots level. When they're talking about all these themes, these big themes, you know, your G20s, your Ndondon. I remember at some point, there was a point in which social development used to have imikonzo, where they would have social development showcasing all government services, showcasing, and then people would be able to do their ID books here, and then someone who has not been able to do a social grant for the child would be able to do that. But today we're just kumshing, we're talking English. And people, there is no impact at the grassroots, we're just up here. It's good to be up here and deal with issues of diplomacy, deal with issues of economic diplomacy and all that, but what about the layman on the street? And people are not led. You know, we do have an erosion in terms of ethical leadership, both in politics and public administration. We've seen it in the Zondo Commission, and now in the Madlanga Commission, it's even worse, and it's even worrying with the Madlanga Commission. My greatest concern with the Madlanga Commission, rather, was that it has exposed our vulnerabilities in terms of our security as a country. It's problematic for me personally when I have to look at what's a screenshots being called intelligence. I mean, what mediocre is that? Screenshots is intelligence. Nobody's saying that there was someone at this building at this time, there was, you know, is that intelligence? I was like, I do not have a problem with what is being done by the general and everyone. But my problem is that now there is this heroism and this whole, you know, it's problematic in its own. And there is this, you know, I felt that the SMSs rather was just optics. There was nothing substantial that you could tell that somebody did this, somebody did, because even themselves, they're not bringing concrete evidence. They're just messing around. They're part of, to me personally, I like what they're doing in terms of being bold and going forward, but I feel like they're part of the problem because they haven't brought us anything. They're just exciting us. And it's what on TikTok would be called tea. They're just bringing the tea, but not bringing the actual evidence. They're playing, you know. So public offices often become a site of self-enrichment instead of stewardship in this day and age. And the ethical decay at leadership level reflects a broader moral crisis in our society. As you have said, Tabi, corruption has been normalized, you know. And for me, I think it's not something that has only started now. It's how we believe things should be. Because I think a lot of people do not understand when they tell you that you're at a certain board, my son needs a job. They don't understand that the son needs to apply. Yenzi plani, denze what plani? Aniji, akutiwapi. You know, people, it's normal, and people say it openly. I mean, it shocks me how people talk about corruption so openly and say, "Sityapi, kutiwani, kuqhutywapi?" Like you're like, "Hayibo, anasikuphela into nje into encinci yoqhuba, masiqhubeni." You know, it has become so normalized, and dishonesty has been rewarded. Look at how a lot of politicians, if you look at a lot of politicians, those around them, it's always people that will always be the ones that come out on paper. They always reward dishonesty. As long as you're dishonest in South Africa, they love you to bits. And violence and intolerance is spreading. You know, Prof, in what frustrates me about PE is that we grew up in this city and families have been doing traditional ntontoni, imicimbi, for their children and whatnot. Do you know that it cannot happen in peace in this city? Because people come and take the mbuzi and live with it. Do you know that if you have a family member that has passed, you know, the criminals will come to your house and say, "Give us money because we see the tent. We know that you've claimed from the insurance." You are bereaved. Where is our humanity? That's how this city has been reduced to. I was telling a relative sometime this week, saying that I want to come and do a braai in New Brighton, and this relative said, no, let's go to your home at Jeffreys Bay. Man, I don't want to kumsh. I want a braai nje. No, braai lokshini. Because the minute you light fire, people think that you have money. They come and attack you. That's how bad it is. So there is really, really a serious declining trust in public institution, and the collapse of ethics in leadership mirrors the moral decay, as Untabi has said, within our communities. When leaders lose their moral compass, the nation loses its direction, and now the nation has lost its direction. That's why, as people, it's what I call it in Goku sitya esiqwini. We are eating each other. You know, we like animals. We're eating each other, basically. That's the sad condition of our society. It is important, colleagues, that we need to reclaim purposeful leadership within our institution and in our communities and everyday life. We need to revisit the moral foundations of leadership integrity, humility, and accountability. We can do that by rebuilding public institutions around ethical governance and professional excellence. And we need to educate and mentor a new generation of leaders, young people grounded in public ethics, social justice, as servant leadership, which is yourselves, colleagues, standing there and wearing beautiful uniforms. We need to restore collective ethics in political movements and public life. Leadership must once again serve people, not personal networks. Purposeful leadership today will be achieved through standing firm for the truth, even when it's unpopular. I know a lot of people think that leadership is all about being loved. It's not about being loved. You have to be firm. You need to stand for your truth, no matter what. About 3 weeks ago, I get a call from a newly appointed HOD in Gauteng. And she says to me, Mchana, I have a problem, man. The minute I came into the department, the chief of staff of the MEC called me and said, we have completed all our procurement processes for big projects. So you're coming here to do nothing. Did you talk by who? The chief of staff. No, don't worry. She's even calling even the CFO. She's running everyone amok. Did you know? But why don't you confront her? But I don't want to rail feathers that he hasn't done. Print out the organogram. Put it on the table. And remind who's who. If she doesn't listen, go to the principal and tell the principal, you know, you must understand what your chief of staff is doing. Anything goes wrong, I am the accounting officer. What the auditors are going to ask for, if there is any irregular audit outcomes, they are going to ask me, and not your chief of staff. Did you need to be firm? I used to be firm back in the days I've been sidelined. And some of the people that sidelined me, I remember a political leader I used to work with that sidelined me. Today, she's the one who calls me. At Fundi, you used to say so, you know. You used to tell me these things. Now we're friends. But back in the days, she sidelined me because I differed with her. I've differed with people to a point that recently it almost cost me my life, but I was very firm on it, that I am not going to back down. If push comes to shove, then be it, I won't be the first person to die. If it happens, I will reincarnate. I've been attacked physically, I've been attacked anyhow, I'm still here. And instead, they have helped me because I'm even worse now. They must bring it on, I'm not scared. I'm not scared of them and their cronies and their criminals chasing me on the streets. They can chase me, they can, you know, they can bring more violence, I don't care. So purposeful leadership is not about occupying positions, it's about occupying a moral ground. It's very important. And now a moral imperative, the renewal of leadership begins with the renewal of society's moral fiber. You know, I usually say to my friends, especially I was talking to someone in England one time when I was still studying in England, I said to this person, in my country, when you get into a car crash, the first thing that someone is going to do before they call the emergency services, they're going to look for valuables. Before they even call an ambulance, they look for valuables. Meaning that as much as we say our leaders are a problem, we're also a problem as society, because we're the same society that produced that mediocre we see. That mediocre we see was produced by us. They were produced by the same people that say when you work at a pharmacy, you're able to sell medication here at gas. The same people that have normalized all these crimes, the criminal elements in our society. We need to ensure that families, schools, faith institutions, and communities need to restore the culture of honesty, respect, and accountability. We cannot expect ethical leaders to emerge from an unethical society. Mhlaba's generation taught us that values are not inherited, they are cultivated. the real struggle today is for moral generation than anything. In closing, we need to reaffirm Raymond Mhlaba's legacy as a mirror and a map. Comrade Raymond Mhlaba's life remains both a mirror for us and a moral compass for our time. It reflects the distance between the ethical vision of our liberation movement and the moral compromises of the present. But it also points us towards a path of renewal, a reminder that integrity, humility, and selfless service remains timeless prerequisites for genuine leadership. As we commemorate his life, let us not reduce his example to nostalgia. Let us instead translate it into practice in our institutions, our professions, and in our everyday conduct. To embrace the purposeful leadership of Comrade Raymond Mhlaba's generation, it is to anchor our democracy into ethics, re-inspire our public institutions with integrity, and reimagine leadership as a service grounded in moral purpose. May his legacy continue to instruct us that leadership is not a contest of power, but a commitment of principle, not a pursuit of privilege, but a vocation of service. You know, one thing that I wish to encourage you is that at times you are going to meet a lot of resistance when you lead, but do not lose heart. I remember recently I had a program, even Dr. Mtimka knows about it, people like Bomotse know about it, because I like creating a community. I work as a community, I don't work alone. Always consult this person, that person to do something. I was concerned about the status of military veterans in our society, because those are the ones that actually fought for our freedom, but the way they are, the indigency worries me. So what I did was to develop a strategy. As I was chairing a committee of military veterans, developed a strategy, and it was moving. From the office of the premier, the strategy went straight to the office of the deputy president. All the advisors of the deputy president requested a meeting. We met online, and we all agreed that we're moving ahead with this. There was excitement, you know. I went to other departments, got more budgets, we worked. It was coming together. We even said, let's rally in the dependents of veterans because they were born into the cycle of poverty. So let's break it in these families. What happened was, as I was getting into office, there was someone on the phone talking to another person. This person is telling this person how they told the minister that I'm campaigning for a political party. And I was sad because as a person, the last time I was politically active is when Julius Malema in the youth league were disbanded. I was in the youth league at that time. Since then, I've never been active. I've been this person. And now it was really disappointing because for me, I wanted to solve a certain problem. And the DP was like, this is the solution you've been looking for. His advisor were like, where have you been all along? Everybody was excited, even the veterans themselves, as difficult as they can be. They sat and withdrew their own strategy and they were excited. They were like, this is definitely going to work. Got a call from the minister. She said, you are not going to campaign for the African National Congress using state funds. I was like, what? And it was cancelled because someone felt like, no, it's not going to happen, and lied about me. I was hurt. I cried immediately from that encounter. I went to church. Lo and behold, I have left that institution, but I saw my program being launched. The micro bakeries for military veterans, I saw it being launched. It was about the ego for them, but for me it was about the respondents. As long as the veterans are benefiting something. If they thought that it was about me, it's okay. It was not about me, as long as my vision lives on. So when you're a leader, your vision can live on without you, as long as it lives on because your intentions were pure. When you are intentional, you need to ensure that you are steadfast in your beliefs and you fight for what you believe in. So that's it for me. Thank you.
So I can tell you for sure that you and Tabi have a lot to talk about after what you've said. And I certainly have also worked for advisors to ministers. I know exactly the story we're talking about. We have come to the end of the big talks. Now it's time to invite you to ask really some questions. I'm interested in particular from the young people, the leadership we're trying to talk to take leadership up. Let me tell you a story that I told in the morning about what I think leadership is. When I was in matric, many of you probably were not born, in high school, we had a teacher that was not really good at mathematics, and she was really interested in her own things, and we were failing. And one of my classmates, who was my friend, said, you know what, Khanti, there's this program on TV. It was by Mrs. Smith. Many people will know it, sponsored by Liberty Life. And said, you know, during the time she's not in class, maybe we can watch that program for mathematics. And so what she did was to help us put together, to raise some funds, and then take whatever little funds we have and actually buy a TV set and a video cassette. Again, most of you probably know only DVD players. And we bought that, and we would watch it every time in class. And we passed, and I was able to go to university to study economics, and the rest is history. But the point I'm telling you is that this part about leadership is something you can do where you are, small things like that become very, very big things. So I'm going to start some questions. Can I have the first 3 hands in the audience? All right. I already have 3. I can see 3 on this side. We're going to start with the gentleman with the hat, and then there's a cap, and then behind the cap. Very short, please. If you are going to make a comment, again, short comment, we have run out of time. But thank you very much for the time. Yeah.
Can I talk Afrikaans or English?
Can you speak Afrikaans?
Because my language is
Yeah,
actually...
go ahead, and then...
I have
and
to
then
greet you,
Go ahead. Please.
Kaises. I have to greet you, Kaises. Is it okay if I greet you, Kaises?
Yes, please, please.
Yeah, okay. I'm Reverend Leonard John Caesar of the Khoi and the Sun. Not Khoi son. Khoi or son, but I'm the Khoi. The reason why I say not Khoi son, I was listening to all the speeches. I don't want to go back. I was listening to what was talking about. I'm the youngster of that time of the party system of Raymond Mhlaba and all them, who was very small. And they went on strike, on a hunger strike so that we can be released because we are too small to be there in the jail. But what I was listening to here today is that the professor make it clear about the Khoi and the Sun. We don't have actually a leadership problem. What we have problem is, after the vote of 94, those who led the constitution that was implemented with the human rights inside the constitution, it was being led wrongful. The reason why I said like that, the vote was established and the leading party is the African National Congress. That was established by all the cultures, including the Khoi and the San. But those who lead it wrong. And that have us destroyed. And this generation sitting here today, for almost the school, Utnik High, I was a scholar at that Utnik High, and I was banned by the government not to be in the school. So, I want us to understand, my question is clear. For these youngsters to sit here today, and we who are here in the audience, our problem in South Africa is we have to go back to the drawing board and recognize all the culture that established the Africans have come to lead the human rights in South Africa, so that we can have a direction of Raymond Mhlaba and all of them, so that their bones can rest, so that we can find a direction to give also the Khoi and the San the real recognition with all the Ngunis and all others that is there. Please don't, I have my question, I did have a question, but it's more than a speech. But please understand me, because this is important, because you talk about Raymond Mhlaba. And I was a little boy when I was among them when they went on a hunger strike. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Good day to everyone. Igama lami nguSiseko kaMthembu. And I'm actually a student here in this beautiful, prestigious university of ours. And it's actually the best university in Africa. And I know you're from UCT, but we will not be told otherwise. Yes. I drafted two questions for Mr. Nkuhlu, but after hearing the speeches, okay, no worries. After hearing the speeches of the three individuals, anyone can take it actually. In your experience advising and leading institutions, what is the most overlooked economic lever for empowering historically marginalized communities in South Africa? Thanks.
Sanbon, igama lami nguSifiso. Okay. Good evening. My name is Sifiso Masombo. I'm also a student at NMU studying accounting, so I'm inspired by the same. So I also had many questions, but I'll have one now. So my question is to the panelists. How do we reconcile the purpose of sacrifice of Comrade Mhlaba's generation with the current leadership's widespread failure to even maintain the integrity of public funds?
Oh, okay. Okay, so in your experience advising and leading institutions, what is the most overlooked economic lever for empowering historically marginalized communities in South Africa?
Yeah, so what's the most important thing we've got to do to make a big difference in South Africa in terms of the economy?
Yes.
Is that the only one? And then yours. Go ahead, one more time.
Okay. How do we reconcile the purpose and sacrifice of Comrade Mhlaba's generation with the current leadership widespread failure to even maintain the integrity of basic public funds?
So where did it fall apart between the time of Mhlaba and where we are now? What is the thing that broke it? And then that was it. And then, of course, we had a comment there that was quite important.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the questions. There's no disagreement on the question of recognition and getting things right about all the nations that were here, the indigenous nations. So I'm not going to comment further on that. I also feel very strong that it's something that we need to get right. It's work in progress. Yeah, the economic lever is my main theme. I believe that the economic lever, possibly, I know that sometimes we talk at different levels, but at the high level, is getting a correct understanding of the pillars of modernization, of building a new country that has got capacity to deal with poverty, dignity, and so on of people. And I'm saying that modernity has got two pillars. One is democracy, human rights, that we're focusing on in South Africa. The other one is science and technology, building the scientific and technological capacities of the people. And that pillar, we have not given it the same attention as the Asians have done. That's why we're struggling to actually overcome poverty and underdevelopment. So the components of getting that right, the second leg of modernization, we need leaders who have got intellectual capacity to understand what I'm talking about, what it means to actually address both legs of modernization. So, but I'm just going to leave it at that. You know, the falling apart has to do simplistically with the quality of leadership that has been deteriorating. You know, in 1994, we all knew, and the leadership, those who led were aware that the world was watching. These Africans have never run any country with competence and capacity and managed to achieve the scientific and advancement of other countries. They were watching. And therefore, the President Mandela and those governments at the beginning, they tried very hard to really make sure that they have got capable government in terms of the quality of the people that they appointed to run the parastatals and so on, the policies that they adopted. But that focus deteriorated over the years, and it was replaced by the president and the elite really using the power that they had to enrich themselves at the expense of the rest of society. And the details of that, I don't have time to explain that, but it was that deterioration or erosion of the capacity, integrity, visionary capacity of our leaders, and the decline in purposeful leadership, or erosion of capacity to lead with purpose, as well as the capacity to place the interests of the greater public on top of those of the self, but allowing, using the powers to enrich you as the leader and a small circle around you, and forgetting about the fact that you are elected to serve all the interests of the people. But how we come to that, I've explained in the book again. I've made the examples of how other African countries gravitated towards the same unfortunate situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those questions, and thank you for the gentleman in the hat, and for educating us. Many of us are not as exposed, particularly, you know, to discussions with people like yourself. So thank you for that education. When it comes to what the most important economic lever is, perhaps I'm a bit biased, but I would say it would be the empowerment of women. You know, I think where you see countries that take the security of women, the empowerment of women, the education of women seriously, that has serious potentials to pull communities out of poverty. And so I think in as much as we have had interventions in the past, we have not done enough. I see it in my own circle, and I think that that is the one lever that if truly we were to dedicate ourselves to equality of the sexes in this country would go quite far. On where things went wrong, Prof. Nkuhlu is quite correct, and I think I must really lead on his leadership, having really observed this over, you know, having a longer time series than I. But I think my observations here are that when our leaders moved from individual poverty to prosperity, they forgot their why. And I think that where you start to look not at the community, but at the self and the enrichment of the self, you really tend to forget why you were doing this. There was a very strong sense of purpose in 1994. We all had a battle that we were fighting. We were all rallying after the same cause. And I think that as prosperity came to some and others were left behind, many forgot the reason. And I think that's why we find ourselves in the situation that we do currently. But yeah, maybe let me leave it then. Is there anything?
Okay, thank you so much, Tabi. trying to think which question, Ghana. Because both have been responded to, but let me just say something. In terms of, you spoke about, oh, sorry. You asked about some of what could be done to improve our economy, right? For me, one of the things that I think would be important in terms of trying to improve it is that the SOEs in their very nature were supposed to actually generate revenue for the country. But now we are in a situation in this country that our SOEs are not sustainable to a point that they are the ones that are taking money from fiscus rather than them bringing in money, bringing in revenue. We have that crisis at this point. It's very important to actually look at the SOEs, I think, each and every sector, because I'll make an example with the defense sector, where I've been, you know. The defense sector, there was a challenge that South Africa had a lot of IP that was wanted by the world. The rest of the world was looking up to South Africa. The apartheid government had built a lot of technology in terms of defense technology. They had a lot of IP in terms of intellectual property. It was, I mean, in terms of defense, of the defense industry, it was one of the most viable. If we were not during apartheid, if we were not on the top 5 in the world, after the, I think we were rated amongst even the military industrial complex in the US. It was there. But there were people that were individuals that were very, very corrupt, took our IP, went and sold it to another country, a very wealthy nation, and left us with nothing. And if you would remember on the news, I don't want to mention names, but if you would remember on the news, there was an institution, I think about 2-3 years ago, that had a staff meeting like this with the board and the executive, where individuals were crying for salaries. And that particular institution used to build armored vehicles. It was known all across the world. It was known for Roy Falk. No one can shoot the Roy Falk in the world. We're the only country with a helicopter, with a military helicopter, that cannot be shot in the world. We have a lot. Our SOEs, if we had to dig within our SOEs, we'd find a lot of gold and a lot of diamond that we could use, repolish, and resuscitate our economy. It's very important to take the very same IP that we have and try and exploit it to ensure that we generate revenue for the country. We need to make money now. We have no time we cannot bleed money for SOEs anymore. If an SOE cannot survive, it cannot survive. That sector must be privatized. We have no time for that. We need to be impatient in terms of dealing with those SOEs that are taking from the budget. Thank you.
Thanks for that. To the young people, I'm sure there was a lot of words you couldn't hear or you didn't understand, like IP. I'm not going to explain what it is, but note it down and go and look it up, because I think it's important for you to learn some of these things. And then we will take those last 3 questions as we noted them, short and sweet, so that we can send people home.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Welcome, Prof, and your team. My name is Mthwabo Ndube. I'm one of the people who have been carrying the bags of Omre for 15 years after 1990. I'm worried about the input that Prof has put. I would like if you could, Prof, have dealt more in depth around really who runs the world, who runs continents, who runs governments. Because I'm very worried about subjective factors and reduce the whole issue of oppression and corruption into individuals. The other issue is that we must be careful of a narrative of the imperialists and the oppressors that we perpetuate to these young minds here. That in Africa, innovation, in Africa there is no progress, or we lag behind in many things. We are the first people to bring innovation in writings. The Greeks and the Europe learned from us. It's not the other way around, guys. Black people we developed the bulb. Black people, not Europeans. We developed the bathing and showers, not Europeans.
All right.
The last part I would deal with
Can I
Yes?
And then I will recommend, I'm going to get to one of the books because actually he explains some of these things quite well in the book. We can make that exchange. If I get to the book on my account, then we make an exchange. And
Okay.
you
My only question will be,
yeah.
Prof and the panelists, can you say something about post-colonization? Post-colonization, people.
Again in the book.
Because,
I
no,
promise.
wait about the book. Post-colonization is that the ANC was in power 94, but they were in chains. Africa, whole of Africa was in chains. It's not as simple of Mandela was the best, Mbeki was the best, or Zuma was the best. No, it's more than that. These are subjective factors. Tell us about the objective economic issues. That's what I'm trying to want to emphasize.
Thank you very
Not
much.
individuals.
Thank you.
Manbulele nam elithuba lokubana ndithethe apha. This lecture, one thing I want to appreciate about it is the seed that has been planted on these young minds. But my question is about how do we expand on that from this point? How do we make sure that all these ideals, it's not something that they are gonna just hear it today and leave it. That's my main issue, whether it's directed to NMU or any other one, but I wish to appreciate the seed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna give that to Prof. Mutwa to take it up. And then there's the last, that was the last one, yes? Yeah. Last one. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pai. My name is Hlomela Kapoko. While we're cognizant of the time, and before you send me to the book, I think it would be an injustice to not appreciate Uprof and his honesty. I think for the first time in a while, it really reveals the kind of leader he is and the kind of leaders we need to date. Prof, there's something they say in Xhosa, you were lambasting people if one listened adequately. And it reminded me of a quote that says, tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to it. And I believe you did that a lot in criticizing and politically analyzing the current status quo of the country. Mine comes from being born and bred in the Eastern Cape. We are a province that has produced some of the greatest leaders. We have Steve, if you look at the Rivonia trial alone, your Omre, Steve Biko's, we have Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and yet we're still one of the poorest provinces in the country. And I want to understand why is that. It's as if we produce these leaders and they exit and they become prominent in other spaces. And so perhaps the question is, how do we retain sound leaders within our province? The Eastern Cape has the IDZ in East London. We have Gora. How are we poor? Perhaps it speaks to the critical thinking and leaders who are visionary. And so I guess, I don't want to go to the book, but I just want to sip it to say for myself, as someone who's born and raised in the Eastern Cape, how do we retain? We've got an incredible institution, and yet everyone wants to leave the province. And the second one speaks to...
Thank you. I have to stop you there. We're really out of time.
You're taking me to the book, but it speaks to public office for Sise Square, but yeah, we'll talk outside.
Thank you. Okay, so for the respondents, because we're completely out of time, I'm going to give you 1 minute each as your closing remarks as you try and respond to that. So what you've heard, those questions, you just use them as your final remarks for 1 minute each. We are at 7, and you know, back at home, the Sakula, if you came home, Isbane says like, and the curtains were closed, you were in major trouble. Because we are about, what Isbane is like, and who closed the curtains. So these kids now are in major trouble. So I'd like you to say 1 minute, so that at least it's not so bad. Go ahead, Prof. Gushli.
No, thank you very much. Thank you to you as program director. Thank you to the university for this opportunity just to share these ideas with you. I sincerely hope that I provoked you a little bit to think about where we are and what contribution you can make, and also be very honest in terms of our successes and shortcomings. But again, don't outsource this thing. Take responsibility as the educated class to actually, the power is in your hands. If the country fails, it's not only Ramaphosa who fails, it's us as educated people who fail. So if we can do that and say, if you are a member of a student organization, whatever organization you belong to, you ask yourself, is my generation grappling with the things that we should be grappling for in terms of making our honest contribution to make South Africa better? Or are we just saying, when are we going to get our chance to self-enrich ourselves at the expense of the majority? Yeah, the remarks that have been made, you are right.
Don't worry, Prof, I am going to buy him the
I
book.
could not address all the things in the book, but really, the things that I'm saying about African agency, touch on these things that you're talking about. But I cannot expand on that now. But thank you very much. This has been a great opportunity. I look forward to you reading the book and in some way finding a way of a follow-up so that we can further engage each other and see how we can generate ideas to make South Africa better. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Klanti, and thank you to the audience. Thank you to Professor Nkutlu for the very thought-provoking and challenging remarks, and to the leadership of the university for providing this platform. Really, I have very little else to add, but Prof. Nkutlu, I would just like to close off with a request. In listening to many of the questions here and to your address, what I'm reading from it is that as Africans, we seem to be grappling with the problem where populism has taken the place of intellectualism. And we need to collectively find a place where intellectualism is revered once again, because I truly believe if you look at the character of the stalwarts that we celebrate today, intellectualism was highly regarded. And today, it is something that is really frowned upon and really looked at as a characteristic of the elite. And I think that we need to start thinking about how we bring intellectualism back in mode so that we can start to get the kind of thinking that will propel us forward. But thank you very much, Prof. and everyone.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Thank you to fellow panelists, and thank you to the program director and the management of the university and the audience for this opportunity. For me, I guess it's just to talk to my generation about something that has really been concerning me, is that we do have, one thing that you can look at the generation of Omri and them, they were informed. They sought to be informed. They were informed leaders, Tina, especially the 80s generation, I've been worried about my generation that we are a giggling generation. We are on social media, laughing perpetually. Even serious matters, to us are a joke. We even say it that as South Africans, serious things, we laugh about them. What's funny about that you laugh about serious matters? I mean, really? Can't we discuss serious matters and find solutions as a generation? We're just giggling. If we are not cyberbullying all the other nations, we always say that on TikTok, when a South African comes through, you must know they're going to eat you alive. They're going to write in a corner. We pride ourselves for bullying everybody else, whilst everybody else is discussing important issues in how they take their nations forward. I was worried one time, I was asked at Stanford to actually present on a topic on the public opinion and diplomacy nexus. I said, actually, I'm very worried because I cannot write about it in the context of my country. Because in my country, I don't even think 10% of my country knows what diplomacy is. I don't even think that they know what public diplomacy is to start with. So, and even in terms of public opinion, it's manufactured. They don't think for themselves. Once something is dropped in the lifeblood of the internet, it's gone. They believe it. They take it as the gospel truth. So we need to start to be a thinking generation so that we can leave, we can be able to take over this country from the generation Kaprof here and take it forward and also be able to leave something for the generations after us. If we are giggling, we'll giggle perpetually and everything left will still be stolen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I won't add anything to any of the things you've said. My grandfather was a twin, and his twin was a priest in Ewisil. And so if you put me in front of a mic and a pulpit like this, I could go on forever. And so I won't. Thank you very much for having been a wonderful audience. We will now hear closing remarks from Professor Maseko, who will then send us home. Thank you very much.
The council members here and those who are watching online, VC, Prof. Mutwa, Vice Chancellors, other executive management of the university, Prof. Ngutlu, Mama Ngutlu, staff, students, of course, Kanti, and Fundiswa, and Ntabi, good. And of course, the learners, I'm sure you won't forgive me if I forget you, the learners who always support us in these events. Good evening, colleagues. I have a fairly long speech, but I promise I've cut it in the interest of time. I've been asked to offer closing remarks as well as vote of thanks. I'm going to focus more on vote of thanks, but there's just one thing, VC, I would like to say in relation to Prof's comment about science and innovation or scientific inventions of the 18th and 19th century and how they gave Europe a leap forward, but also gave them an authority to bully the rest of the world. And Prof, you were saying that we could take from that. But given VC, our positioning as a university in how we center humanities in our intellectual project, I would also like, Prof, for us to take a leaf from most of the schools or education from Asia, where the first 3 to 6 years are taken grooming a student or a learner for how it means to be a human, how it means to be a person. And I think it's those values that are ingrained in humanities that will actually set us apart from Europe, where we center humanness, but also we harness innovation, we harness sciences, and all sciences, not just natural sciences. Of course, I'm standing for humanities and social sciences here. So when we talk about sciences, we talk about natural sciences and social sciences. So we can harness all that, but center in that what it means to be a person. And so the values, Prof, of Ubuntu that you talked about in the morning will really set us apart from, we will not bully the rest of the world. And we will really center what it means to, not to focus on individual rights, but to focus on rights that are for the upliftment of the entire society. That is what we're seeking to do at Nelson Mandela. We're seeking to enable societal transformation and not individual transformation by centering the humanities in our scholarship. So I had to say that just because I'm the executive dean of the humanities faculty. And then thank you, Prof, so much. In the morning, you challenged us. Really, I just want to repeat to students the issues of visionary leadership, intentional leadership, purposeful leadership. is very important for us. And I think even those students who were there in the morning, I think hearing this now again, I hope it adds value to what we got to learn in the morning. Thank you, Prof. And thank you, Ntabi Nkosi, Ms. Tabi Nkosi, and Ms. Fundiswa Askweya. I've said that it's very easy, Prof. Our guests accept our invitations graciously. I didn't have to really grapple. I say, of course, I'm from Nelson Mandela, the best university in the world, not just the continent, as one student gave testimony here. I just say, I'm from Nelson Mandela University. I've just been tasked by the Vice Chancellor, Professor Sibongile Mutwa, to invite you. And then people just like, you know, they just respond positively, thank you. And I remember, Ntabi, I called you were driving to holiday with your family, but you still took my call. I'm really grateful for that. Kanti, your invitation was, I won't say that but thank you for accepting that. I'll tell your friend, though, that I did acknowledge you. Mama, thank you, Mama Nkutlu, for accompanying Udada here. We're really, really grateful also for the wisdom that you shared with us when we were conversing at the other platforms. I want to acknowledge the council members. I think we're doing something right by you showing support by attending our events like this. So thank you, Ms. Mpato, as representing council here. I want to acknowledge the Deputy Vice Chancellors. Some of them have left. You see, I saw Dr. Mueng, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Learning and Teaching. I saw also Prof. Kiet, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Engagement Transformation, and Mr. Lutando Jack, DVC People and Operations. Also Dr. Webb, the Vice Chancellor's office, really supporting us here. And thank you, Prof, your office, for really allowing us the freedom to do this and not dictating to us on who to invite and so on. Thank you for that. Ongama and your staff, thank you so much for operationalizing this. It's one thing to think of something, but if it doesn't get operationalized, then we're in trouble. The SRC and the students, thank you always for your support, and the student societies, thank you so much. I see Eviva at the back. Thank you. The academic staff here for always supporting us. The Raymond Mhlaba board members and associates. Of course, the COI and the SEN are led by Mr. Stirman. They've left now. Amakawe A2 Foundation, Nelson Mandela Bay civic leaders and committee members, all our service providers, and lastly, but most importantly, all the high schools, and we really apologize. We know that the agreement with the teachers is that we should let you latest by 6:30. We apologize for that. We wanted to come to our events in the future, so we'll try and keep the time. But it's important that we name the schools here: Chapman High School, Uitenhage High School, Kwamataki High School, Lungisa High School, Ne-EZ Pakane High School. Lastly, Prof's book is in our bookshop at the university, and it's selling for 350 rand. We are not making any profits from the book. We bought it and we sell it at cost. We're not making money, so please buy it for all this that has been shared by Prof. I note that some of the things were misunderstood, probably because, Prof, of the time, the shortness of time, that we're not able to explore this deeply. The book is there. I note, Kanti, that you've offered one book to some of our speakers. And then I'm supposed to hand over gifts. Ongama? Gifts? And then